Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here at Republica. I hope you're all having an amazing time. I certainly am. I'm here today to talk to you about art and war. But before I begin my talk, I want to kind of gauge your opinion about something. I'm going to show you some pictures on the screen behind me, and I want you to raise your hand if you think that these pictures show a basic human need. Okay, so this is the first picture. This is humanitarian aid in the form of food. So how many people here think that food is a basic need for humanity? Okay, there's one person that doesn't there. I don't know how they're still alive. Okay, the next picture is a picture that displays shelter. So how many people here think that shelter is essential, a basic need for humanity? Again, the same person not raising their hand there. I don't know where they live. And another picture here, and this picture for me illustrates water. How many people here think that water is a basic need? Okay, the final picture that I'd like you to tell me whether you think this is a basic need is, this is a picture of young children. Okay, two people already. Young people dancing, and this for me represents art and creativity. How many people here think that this is a basic need, along with the things I just talked about? Okay, so that's quite an interesting response. I didn't quite expect quite as many people to raise their hands. Well, for me, art and creativity is absolutely a basic need, and this presents quite a lot of challenges for me in the work that I do. I get asked this question a lot: why art? Why art, not aid? And this is usually followed by, without aid, people will die. And my first response to this is, well, why do I have to choose? Why do I have to? We don't choose between food and water, but why do I have to choose between art and the other things that I talked about? This question came about when I was speaking to a big charity in the UK who was shipping out aid to war zones. And I asked them whether they would be able to take some music equipment so that we could make a music studio in a war zone. And they basically laughed me out of the room. And they said, this is ridiculous. You know, people will die if we don't take this aid. And this was a long time ago, and I thought, okay, maybe they've got a point. Maybe I'm naive. Maybe music doesn't have the power that I think it does. So I carried on working in the field of conflict across the world. And I really discovered that music, creativity, theater, culture is essential to life. And so I want to show you that today and see if I can convince people here of that as well. I kind of want to start with this quote, and it says, "But if culture was a luxury, then why suffer for it? If it were trivial, then why prosecute it? And if it was harmless, then why die for it?" And this is a quote from a prince in the Netherlands who's connected to something called the Prince Claus Foundation. And for me, this kind of provides a good context for the talk today. First of all, if culture and creativity wasn't so powerful, then why would the first people to be taken and tortured under a dictatorship be the artists? This is a photograph of a friend of mine, Ramir Sam, who was a singer in the Egyptian revolution. So he was a singer in Tahrir Square. And shortly after the revolution, he was taken and tortured in the Egyptian museum by the military. And for me, this is one man and a guitar. So why is his music so powerful that it warrants the military to go and to torture him? To give you a bit of context and a little bit about me, I'm not necessarily from a war zone. I'm from this place. This is a place called Burnley, which is just next to Manchester in the UK. It's a very small town where people don't generally leave. People don't look outwards to the world for inspiration. So I never really thought that I would have the opportunity to leave Burnley. But then music came into my life, and for me, on my own personal journey, music's been really important in taking me out of a place that I probably wouldn't have left without it. When I was 10 years old, my parents bought me a guitar, which I didn't really want, but I learned to play it, and that took my life in this completely different direction. I learned to play guitar, I was in bands, I started a record label, and I made music events all across the world, and that helped me to get this understanding of how important music can be in transforming people's lives. And so for me, if nothing else, creativity will take people on a journey. I don't know what that journey is or where it ends, but it will definitely do that. for me, creativity is important because it can be made anywhere and by anybody. The great thing about art is that you don't need a lot of resource to make it happen. This is a photograph of theater in the Congo. Theater, you just need your body. If you're making hip-hop, you just need your voice. So for me, it can be made anywhere. And the most important art, the art that I enjoy the most, is made by the people who need to make it. It's urgent. I'm the co-director of an organization called In Place of War, and we work with creativity in places of conflict across the world. And we've been doing this for the past 12 years or so. We work with education, we work with the creation of spaces, and the mobility of artists in war zones. And we've been doing this in about 40 countries across the world. Our work started with one question, and that was, do people make art when bombs are dropping on their heads? And we started by exploring theatre in places of conflict and asking, first of all, does theatre happen? And if it does, then why are people making theatre and how are people making theatre? And to cut a long story short, this took many years, we found that in every time of conflict, post-conflict and peace, people are making theatre. That theatre may change and may look different at different times of conflict, but it's always being produced. So this kind of threw a question at me, which was, why is art so important that at the most challenging times in people's lives, are they still making it? Do they still feel they have to make it? So I want to show you a few examples of different artistic practice that I've seen across the world that, for me, manages to do something that without art wouldn't exist. The first place that I want to show you is Zimbabwe. Okay, so this is a satirical news program called the Zambezi News, and these guys are actually in Berlin right now, and they're performing on Wednesday, I think. You should check it out. Zambezi News is amazing because what they do with satire is quite incredible. When I went to Zimbabwe for the first time, I tried to have a conversation in a local bar with my friends about politics, and it just was a no-go. It was absolutely not spoken about. People felt scared that they might be taken and tortured, and all these things are very much a reality in Zimbabwe. What Zambezi News does is satirizes the government through their news program in a place where you can't speak about politics in a bar. They produce their news program on DVDs and distribute them across the townships and stream their program online. And they reach 9 million people in Zimbabwe with this program. Now, for people from Europe, this might seem quite normal to produce this kind of program. But believe me, it's completely unique. And for me, through satire, it opens up a space in Zimbabwe where people can question the government. They can question what's happening. They can provocate. They can satirize. So for me, this is really, really powerful. These guys also create a festival called Shoko Festival. And again, they have a festival here of hip-hop and spoken word in a place where you can't talk about politics in a bar, but you can stand on stage and you can be politicized through hip-hop and spoken word. Last year, I went to see their festival where Zambezi News performed, and their festival site was in front of the ZANU-PF, this is Mugabe's party, in front of their building in the center of Harare. And Zambezi News performed, and for me, it was one of the most political acts that I've ever seen. Thousands of people were there watching comedians satirize Robert Mugabe. Nobody got arrested. And this, for me, is a very unique thing, so shows the power of satire in this space. Talking about space, which I think is really important in terms of making transformation within communities, this is a space called Afro Reggae, and it's based in the favelas in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Afro Reggae started out as a community newspaper in a place that is very challenging in terms of gang-related violence and pretty much was a no-go area. This community newspaper evolved into a multifaceted creative space where young people can go in and learn drama, learn dance, learn how to produce music. And this space engages people in positive activity that they otherwise would not be able to be involved in. Again, this is another space that I really love. This is called Tuna El Fuerte, and this is based in Caracas in Venezuela, in a very dangerous ghetto. Tuna El Fuerte is a creative space that's made out of converted shipping containers. Every week, 500 young people access this space and come out of the violence that surrounds them and engage in creative activity. So without a space like this, there would be no other option for young people in this neighborhood. Again, sticking with Venezuela, this is a photograph of an orchestra called El Sistema. El Sistema is an orchestra where young people can engage and learn classical instruments across the country. When I visited Venezuela, one of the most surprising kind of consequences of this orchestra manifested itself when I talked to a young boy. And he's a percussionist in the orchestra. And I went to his house, and he was playing his percussion, and he was amazing. And he said to me, every day I have to travel from school to the orchestral rehearsal, and I travel across the ghetto or favela. And it's very, very dangerous for me. Every day I risk my life to do this. But as soon as I sit down and as soon as I play my percussion, I escape. It takes me out of the reality of my everyday life. And for him, his percussion was everything to him. It gave him this alternative to the reality, to the dangerous and challenging reality that he lives in. This is another space. This is in Sri Lanka, in a place called Batticaloa. And this is called the Butterfly Peace Garden. And this was set up during the time of civil unrest in Sri Lanka. This space is a walled garden, and within it, young people can just be young people, and they can be creative, and they can make art. And outside the kind of walls of this garden, people were literally killing each other. There was a full-blown war happening. But this was a safe space where children could go and, again, escape and create. Talking about kind of other aspects of how art can be powerful, this is a guy called Smokey, and he's from Burkina Faso. And Smokey is a hip-hop artist. Through Smokey's music, he recorded an album that, again, questioned the government. The album, the intention was all about a better Burkina Faso. His album was quite political and very strong, and it galvanized young people and brought them onto the streets so that they themselves could be political and revolt against the government. Because of the power of his album, the government bombed his studio, and he had to exile the country. And again, when we think about art as being maybe this kind of soft thing that people do for entertainment, this was a very real thing that the government felt threatened by. So for me, this is very powerful. And again, talking about Rami Assam, the guy I talked about before, he was performing in Tahrir Square when the government were overthrown. And the great thing about what Rami did was he kept people in a situation where they might have been protesting for days, for weeks, or some people even lived in Tahrir Square for many months. And his music galvanized people and kept them there and kept them motivated for this time. This is a photograph from one of my favorite cities in the world. This is a photograph from Medellin in Colombia. And Medellin, many of you may know, has been troubled for decades from narco-related violence. It's the city where Pablo Escobar is from and was, until very recently, the major producer and distributor of the drug cocaine. Young people in the city of Medellin had very restricted options in their life. Most young people from the poorer neighborhoods would be in drug cartels. And the life expectancy of young people in Medellin was 21 years old. Between the years of 1987 and 2000, 40,000 young boys were murdered in the city of Medellin. In Medellin, the young people decided they wanted to create an alternative to this one option, this one choice that they had, which was to go into a drug cartel. So they started a hip-hop movement. They were inspired by hip-hop in New York in the 1980s and bands like Public Enemy. And it started out with them getting cardboard boxes, practicing breakdancing moves, and then people started to rap across the city. The consequences of this were huge in terms of positive impact. Today, there are 2,500 hip-hop acts in the city. And when I went there the first time, this is the thing that changed my mind about how important art can be. This quote. This is a hip-hop MC called Lupa, and he said, "If it wasn't for hip-hop, I would be dead. Hip-hop gave me another option in life, and for that, I'm truly thankful." So that's someone saying that without being able to make hip-hop, they would literally have died. Hip-hop has become so important in the city of Medellin that there are now hip-hop schools in every single comuna or neighborhood across the city where people engage and learn all the 5 forms of hip-hop. So art has all of these different purposes, but one of the things that I've seen, having visited lots of war zones and lots of places that suffer from conflict, is the role of women is often really marginalized in these contexts. Women often fulfill really traditional roles. But I'm seeing art playing a role in terms of empowerment of women across some of the places that we work. This is an artist called Our African Woman Arise. And again, she's from Zimbabwe, from a township called Makokoba. In her township, not only are women very marginalized, but they suffer from things like domestic violence, rape, and so on. And these things are not talked about. They kind of happen under the surface. Our is 22 years old, and she's the first female hip-hop artist from this city. And through her music, she speaks out against these injustices in her township. And this is really powerful. She's an amazing performer. But for me, it does two things. The first thing is it shows that women can have a different option from fulfilling the traditional role that is expected of them. And secondly, it brings to the surface the issues that women face in the township. One of my final examples of kind of the power of art is one of my favorite projects across the world that I've seen. This is a picture in Gulu in Uganda, so a place that's suffered from conflict. It's one of the kind of most challenging places that I've seen. This is an organization they call themselves a hip-hop agribusiness. So this is 15 hip-hop artists, and they have a farm, and they produce food on the farm, and they sell this, and the profit they make from the production of the food enables them to go into prisons in Gulu and deliver hip-hop workshops with prisoners. Through their work, the prisoners that they work with generally don't re-offend. So for me, this is the power of hip-hop in a way to transform opportunities for those people who've fallen themselves in prison. And for me, it's an incredible example of a true social enterprise. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, and I could talk forever about a million different examples, but one of the most powerful things that I've seen in my lifetime is the way in which digital technology has grown and changed. But for me, the power that it has with grassroots communities across the world. This is a photograph of an organization called Media Ninja, who are based in Brazil. They kind of established themselves very much by accident during the uprisings that started a few years ago in Brazil. One guy just started documenting what was happening on his mobile phone. He got arrested, and this became viral across Brazil. They're now a media platform that documents everything that's happening on the ground, and they have this huge audience across Brazil. And what's really powerful about the creative way that they use digital technology is that they're able to tell an alternative narrative to that of the mainstream media. And for me, this is so powerful. So they're able to document and tell the stories of the realities of what's happening on the ground, which often gets not mentioned in mainstream media. So there's some examples that I've encountered across the world through the work that we do within Place of War. And again, I could talk about many more. For me, art has this incredible capacity to give people hope, and it fulfills lots of different roles. It can be political, it can be escape, it can be lots of different things. But everywhere we go, we see it happening and being made. And I think when people have hope, people can then start to make change. This is a photograph for me that might define what we think a war zone or a battlefield looks like. But I think right now, at this time, we are seeing one of the most fundamental changes in our lifetimes happening right now. For me, this idea of a battlefield is changing. This is a picture of soldiers in a desert, probably fighting other soldiers in a desert, where the rules maybe are slightly clearer than they are when now we have soldiers in our airports, soldiers on our streets, soldiers in our parks, in cities right across the world. For me, the biggest change that we're seeing in our time is the changing nature of what a war zone looks like. I feel like war impacts upon every single one of us. And I feel like sometimes we're soldiers, but we don't have weapons. Oops. Things changed fundamentally in September the 11th, 2009, when people flew planes into buildings. And this continues to change today when we have people making explosions across cities in our world. The consequences of war can be felt every single day with people fleeing from conflict and arriving in different countries trying to find a better life. And often when they arrive somewhere else, they're just faced with a completely different conflict. For me, art is a way for us to counter the violence in the world. And it's a way for us to show solidarity for the one thing that we all have in common. Regardless of our religion, regardless of our race, regardless of our gender, art is a way for us to show solidarity for humanity. And this is really important. For people here who've come to watch this talk, I hope that if you didn't believe that art was important, I hope I've gone a little way to showing you how important certainly I think it is. But I still don't think that that's enough. If every person in this room supported an artist in a war zone, if every person in this room helped to share the stories of the most isolated people to counter the narratives of the mainstream media, if every person in this room supported their refugee communities, then this would be a start. We're living in a time of massive change, and we need to be able to face our children and say that we all did something to help support those people who struggle because of the impact and consequences of conflict. I want to end with a quote, and this is a quote of a friend of mine called Ewok, and he's from Durban in South Africa. And he says this, and I think that this, for me, summarizes the power of art. He says, "Can poetry change the world?" I said, "Can poetry change the world?" Well, poetry can change a people, and people can change the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth.
Thank you.
Wow. Let's see. Hands going up for questions. We can take one or two, maybe.
No?
I'd have a couple, if you like.
Sure.
There were so many moving stories, so many personal impressions. How do you manage to take all those home and keep all the dynamic and going?
I guess it's because of the people that we work with across the world. We're working with the most incredible young people who have all of this drive and all of this passion. And for me, some of the most brave people that I've ever encountered working in the most challenging contexts. And so for me, I'm always inspired by what I see. And so the work that we do is how we can support those people and tell their stories on a more global platform. So for me, it's just the fire of the people we work with gives me the fire to take that forward. And quite often what we're seeing when we go out into the field can be very challenging and can be very upsetting. But for me, there's always that kind of resilience in people who are creating all of this art that gives me then the drive to kind of give that a bigger platform, I guess.
And are you just going to keep doing this, which you totally should be doing? Or is there are you planning future steps?
We're just expanding what we're doing. So working across more and more countries, a lot of the stuff that we do around creative entrepreneurialism, around education, we're doing it in more and more different contexts across the world. And I think for me, as much as we can support artists and creative people across the world, as much as there's a need for that, we will continue to do that.
It's great. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you can come home and hang out a little bit at the Gig Makerspace.
Sure.
And then maybe for those of you who are too shy to ask your questions now, you can find us there during the course of the day tomorrow, maybe at some points, and find out a little bit more about your work. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so
Let's have
much.
another big round of applause, please.